Hey guys, Hijinks here. I'm here with a spoiler review of the Halloween remake. Now, we did no spoiler review, and it did pretty well, actually, and thank you guys who saw that. And if you guys are coming to the spoiler review, I hope you guys enjoy this as well. We'll be going through and analyzing the movie and looking at it with spoilers now, where I'll be mentioning things. So I'll be able to kind of open up the discussion a bit more than I could in the not spoiler review, because we tried to avoid the spoilers. But now we will be doing spoilers. I will give a 3-second heads up before the spoilers come into play to make sure you guys know there will be spoilers in the title, spoilers in the thumbnail, and I'll make sure to put spoilers on the screen, and I'll do a 3-second countdown. This was requested by a few people, and the request, might be because you couldn't see it or whatever the case may be, but I'll make sure to paint a decent picture as I can. I won't lie, my notes are a little bit all over the place because I was in a dark theater and kind of had to scrabble in those words whenever I could, because normally the theater doors actually kind of creaked a little bit so I can get a little bit of light to see, but that wasn't the case, and I wasn't going to flash my phone light in there, although we were the only 2 people in the theater, which was nice. So, without further ado, let's hop into the spoiler review, and now I'll give the 3 seconds. So spoilers are in 3, 2, 1, and now we start spoiling. Alright, so Halloween opens up with a clock ticking, which was a nice little touch. We get into Smith's Grove rehab facility, which is to show the evolution of the times. He's been there for 40 years. And something we actually discovered pretty early on is that, A, he can talk, but he chooses not to, and that he's actually very aware of his surroundings. So when you go in there, they describe it as he's dormant. So he's kind of just sitting in his chains. He's aware of things. He's not moving much, but he does know that everyone's around him. He knows that these reporters in specific are actually there, and they note that. And the one thing they do say is not step over the yellow line, because there's a little yellow box around each of the patients. That's like the safety box. Like if you don't step in there, they can't reach you. However, he does know they're there, and that's one of the reasons they were saying, like, he might be dormant, but don't step in that box. He does know you guys are here. They actually pull out his mask to confront him, and actually, when they got close to the box, I thought he was going to grab him, but he didn't. But they pull out his mask from the movies, and it's the Halloween mask, the William Shatner mask, the iconic mask. And everyone starts kind of freaking out. Everyone's chanting, the dog's barking. And I was wondering if they were going for a supernatural touch here, which, I could do without. I definitely didn't want it to be supernatural, but it could be possible that everyone was just reacting to the mask in general, and maybe they weren't reacting to it in like a supernatural sense. But it seemed like it. And if that's the case, that will explain something that we'll get into later on. The shots were really beautiful of all this here, and as I mentioned before, the dialogue was pretty good. I liked a lot of what they had going on here. The music was also really good. And then we cut to a title card. Now here's something cool. In the original Halloween and all, the title card was a pumpkin, and they ran through the title card of Halloween. What they did here was something really cool, and that was there was a rotten pumpkin. The pumpkin was fully rotted out, and it's reversing and coming back to life. And this was to symbolize breathing new life into a dying franchise. Michael Myers, the Halloween franchise. Shouldn't say Michael Myers franchise, because Halloween was supposed to be an anthology. Michael Myers ended up taking over, though. So then we find out later on, they use this line, one monster creates another. And they're referring to Michael Myers creating a monster out of Laurie Strode, and we'll get more into that a little bit later. But we cut over to Laurie Strode, and she kind of lives in isolation. And so these podcasters that were there, the journalists / podcasters, they were originally from the asylum, as I mentioned. They were the ones that pulled out the mask, and they were getting the reaction. They have this new doctor who's kind of like the Loomis understudy. He studied under Loomis and took over Loomis's place. He's really obsessed with Michael Myers, and they know where Laurie Strode is, and their plan is to get Laurie Strode to meet Michael Myers. This is something that everyone kind of wants, and these journalists are supposed to be kind of like a take on true crime podcasters. So like I guess someone similar to popular Rob Dyke, who is a popular known YouTuber. He does a lot of like the true crimes about like murders and things like that. So this is what these guys do. They look into murders, much like Rob Dyke does, and they try to investigate and see what else they could find in the case. So they go to Laurie Strode and they start interviewing her. They get in under the pretense of having $3,000. They're talking to intercom. Laurie Strode's not really interested, and they say, well, would you be interested for $3,000? So she lets him in. They start kind of looking into it, and they start saying how there was an old case they had done that was it had happened 20 years in the past, and after looking at it 20 years later, they found new evidence to kind of understand the killer a bit better. And Laurie Strode was kind of like thrown off by us, like, why are we trying to understand Michael Myers? He killed people, and their thought was that Michael Myers is still a person. And I think this is like a critique on how true crime investigators can be, where a lot of true crime investigators will try to understand the killer and humanize the killer in a sense. And a lot of times the victim becomes demonized at that point, which creates this interesting thing where they start kind of bringing up Laurie Strode's failed marriages and her loss of custody of her daughter. And Laurie Strode has an interesting line here of, why are we trying to understand the killer and making me look like a basket case all because I got divorced 2 times? Which was a nice line to kind of throw in, because it shows an interesting point where when we start understanding killers and we start demonizing the victim, that we're kind of, we're playing teams here. And this is interesting. The male journalist was very, very harsh on her, where he knew about the loss of custody, knew she didn't get custody of her kid back, and he brought it up, and I was like, oh, when did you get custody back? As like kind of like a shot at Laurie Strode, which was kind of hard, and so she let him out. She was like, you guys need to go. But they were pretty nice about Michael Myers. They weren't nice to him, but they were nice about him. But Laurie Strode was definitely living a hard life. There's signs that she's struggling with alcoholism, and she has a failing relationship with her daughter. Her and her daughter don't have a very good relationship, but it seems kind of like she has a decent relationship with her granddaughter, which we'll get a little bit more into later. But the dialogue was really good there, and I feel like it was really solid, because a lot of times you can find that sometimes people who are interviewing, they'll say things. Now, this isn't for every interviewer or even a majority of interviewers, but there have been plenty of interviews that you can find where interviewers kind of overstep, their boundaries. And this was definitely one of those things where it showed it was a reasonable overstepping. It wasn't like this crazy overstepping that that didn't make sense. It was definitely it didn't go too far. It was believable. It was a believable level of crossing the line. And once they crossed the line, I mean, they definitely know they did, and they didn't really go and just push further. They crossed the line, it got stopped there, and they left. They didn't, pursue this anymore. We move on, and we start meeting the family, the Strodes. We have some interesting dialogue. There's some humor between the dad and the daughter and the mom, so it's pretty healthy. These are the Strode family, extended Strode family past Laurie, so it's her daughter and her granddaughter and the son-in-law. And it's actually kind of interesting. It's a nice, very realistic family dynamic. There's a variety of things that you hear here that, believably a parent could say. And it seemed like they were very calm, loving parents, and they seemed like they were up to the times. It wasn't, it wasn't like the family connections were too unrealistic or too outdated, which was a nice way to see that there. I could definitely see they put some research into it. And so we kind of go, and the family seems to have some issues where the daughter brings up, hey, did you invite grandma to this dinner? There's a dinner that they're talking about, and the mom didn't invite the grandmother to dinner, but she's like, yeah, I did. So she's lying. She's definitely avoiding her mom, Laurie Strode, which is an issue, and that kind of upsets the daughter, because the daughter did call Laurie Strode and asked, and Laurie's like, I didn't hear about this. But then we cut over, and we're heading over to class. The friends pick her up, and the granddaughter is going over to class with her friends, and they have some interesting lines there where they kind of talk about Michael Myers and what happened previously, and they kind of explains the retcon, no, they aren't brother and sister, which was kind of funny because they aren't. But they were originally in the original storyline that they were brother and sister, so this was a nice way to be no, it's not true, and kind of retcon that. It was really nice. But then the boyfriend brings up an interesting thing. The boyfriend of her friend Vicky, he brings up, he's like, well, what's the big deal? It's just 5 people. And I guess, you don't. I was thinking about that because they brought up at this point, this is after the first movie. He's only had 5 kills, and there's a lot of other killers that have had a lot more kills. And I guess it brings up a good point. In comparison to other serial killers, he's not all that different. He's not all that crazy when you compare it to like other killers that have 10, 14, 15. And the girlfriend Vicky, who is also the friend of the granddaughter, is like, no, it's her grandma. I'm like, let's not do that. Which was kind of interesting because you don't realize how big that number is. 5 is a really big number when you know the person personally, and that person came after you. But just looking at the stats, it doesn't seem all that crazy, and it was kind of interesting to see a character bring that up, which is something I know a lot of the audience was probably thinking when they heard it. And we go over to the classroom where the granddaughter is sitting in the same spot as Laurie Strode did in the original, which was a nice little wink to the original. And she looks out the window, and right where Laurie Strode would have saw Michael stalking her, the granddaughter actually sees her grandmother, Laurie Strode. And she's standing out there, and they go over this conversation, and she talks to her grandmother. The grandmother gives her $3,000 from the interview, which kind of explains why she did that interview so cheaply. And Laurie's trying to tell her, like, hey, you need to go, just take this money, run to Mexico. They have a nice little exchange. It's a really cool exchange. Definitely she's a cool grandmom. And they talk back and forth, and the granddaughter ends up telling her, like, you just need to let it go. You need to let Michael go. You need to let that be in the past. And this will come into play later. I'm going to actually give you guys some ideas that I have, and apparently a few other people have, about the movie and why this exchange happened like this, and why the $3,000 was given to the granddaughter. We go over and we see Michael Myers. Now here's something interesting. He still has the scar on his eye from the first movie when Laurie Strode stabbed him in the eye with a coat hanger. And I think that was interesting because a lot of movies forget to be consistent about that, but this one didn't miss that consistency. He still has that scar on his eye. And I thought that was so cool because that movie, is an older movie. It's 40 years ago. And so in 40 years, they were able to keep that in there. And it's a small detail that some people wouldn't notice. But, having watched the franchise over and over again, it's so cool to see they kept that in there. They were really consistent. So there's this whole scene where they're getting ready to transport Michael. And in the interview scene, they tell Laurie Strode, like, hey, they're transporting Michael. And she knows the time, date, and place, everything like that. And this is going to kind of come back. And I will come back later when I explain what I think about the ending and how I think this all ties in. But she goes over and she's in her car. She has a little episode where she ends up drinking, and she has a gun, and she's drinking, she's freaking out and crying. And it cuts, and Laurie Strode's family is having dinner, and Laurie comes in, and she's definitely had a few drinks, so you can tell she's a little inebriated. She comes in and kind of makes a bit of a scene, and her and the daughter have a bit of an exchange, and the daughter's like, well, I thought you said you'd stop drinking, and it cuts over to Laurie kind of leaving, and at one point it looks like she's going to jump in front of the car, because she's just kind of bobbing in and out of the street, and it's like, it definitely looks like something that she might be considering doing, and the granddaughter comes out and kind of comforts her, and then Laurie Strode's daughter comes out and comes over to the granddaughter, and it's like, well, now you know how it feels for me. And something that's really interesting is they didn't make anyone super unlikable. Laurie Strode's very likable if you've been watching the whole franchise, and if you're familiar with the Halloween, you can see where Laurie Strode's coming from. And just as a person, you can see where the daughter's coming from, where Laurie Strode was training her daughter to fight Michael Myers, and she wasn't really doing too much mothering. It's doing a lot of making her become like a soldier almost, and putting a lot of stress and emphasis on that. So you could see that the stress and pain caused by Michael Myers was poured down onto the daughter, and that's why she was so upset. And it's you can be sympathetic towards both characters, which is really, really awesome. So then we cut over, and there's a kid and his dad, and they're talking, and so they're talking back and forth, and they come up to a crashed van from the hospital, Smiths Grove Hospital, and there are all the patients are walking around the street, and the dad goes out, and he doesn't come back for a while, so the kid ends up going out. He ends up finding that doctor that took over Loomis's spot, Michael's original doctor, for those of you who don't know. And the kid gets jump scared by him and shoots him, which is actually it was interesting to see, because there's so many times where there's these fake jump scares and there's no consequence. So it was kind of interesting to see there was this fake jump scare and it scared the actual character enough the character reacted. And the kid goes running back to the car, and he starts trying to drive away, and then Michael goes and he ends up killing the kid, actually. The podcaster / journalist, they end up visiting Judith Meyer's grave, and Michael was there, which was interesting. It wasn't like the grave was desecrated or anything like that. There's the lady who's there is like, it's really, most graveyards and most towns have interesting people in the graveyard, like Bernie Mac, and she has this whole little speech about it. She's like, and yet people are coming here to see Judith Myers. So then, Michael's from the graveyard ends up following the journalist over to the gas station. And now here's where you start seeing some stuff from the trailer in there, which was really interesting. Michael walks out. There's a van that reads Resurrection on it, and that's a nod to Resurrection. And so this one journalist goes to the bathroom. It's been a while, so the other journalist goes walking around. And Michael Myers walks into the bathroom, and she hears him kind of walking over, and the other male journalist is walking around. He walks into the gas station, notices that the cashier is dead and the mechanic is dead, and there were both awesome gory kills. There was some great gore effects there, really interesting. The male journalist comes in as Michael is dropping in the teeth and kind of coming after the girl he's trying to kill her, and the male journalist comes in and tries to save her, and Michael bashes his head in, and then he goes and he kills her, the female journalist, and gets his mask back, which was definitely really interesting. He has his suit back. He got it from a mechanic, and he kills the two journalists. So then, now the killing spree starts beginning. It's night. It's Halloween. Everyone's walking around. Michael goes. He kills the lady from the trailer who's making the sandwich, and he kills her with the hammer. Gets his knife back. He goes over to her neighbor. And before that, he walks past these nurses. The nurse and doctor, it's a couple, and they're playing as a medical duo. And they leave. He goes past them. He goes into this other lady's house. She's making a phone call to her friend. And he goes and he kills her, which has a decent kind of kill. But I felt like the throat stab on it was a little bit like missing. I feel like there was some gore effects that were missing there. We cut over to the dance. And so there's a Halloween dance, which I think is a nod to Rob Zombie's sequel, because Laurie Strode in that one goes to a dance, and she has like a whole freak out. But in this one, the granddaughter goes with her boyfriend. They're going as Bonnie and Clyde, but it's reversed. So the boyfriend is Bonnie, and she is Clyde. And it's actually really nice to kind of see this like swap costume, how it worked out. It actually it looked good, honestly. It looked nice. And they're going in and out. She gets a phone call, and she leaves for a little bit. Turns out her boyfriend snuck in alcohol to this event, and he starts making out with a girl who's kind of painted as a tiger, and the granddaughter's not having it. She's really upset. Her name is Allison, by the way. We're going to say Allison from this point on. And she's not having it. So they get in this argument, and he takes her phone, and he throws it in the pudding. I think it's pudding. It was really mushy, and I don't know if they really leave out pudding at dances, because when I was at dances, they never left out any pudding anywhere. But I'm going to say pudding because it looked like pudding, and I can't think about what else it could really be that was like very gushy like that. Throws her phone in there, which makes it hard for these guys to contact each other throughout the movie. This communication will become a big thing, which is kind of believable, because when people get in intense arguments, especially people who are intoxicated, they do make decisions that they'll regret later. And one thing that I've noticed is I know a lot of people I know that have been intoxicated have definitely broke stuff that of mine and other people's, and in these ways of like in these fits of anger. So we go over, and she had called. Actually, it was a call from Vicky. Then we cut over to Vicky, who's babysitting a little boy, and they have this little cute exchange where they're arguing with each other, and she's talking about her boyfriend's going to come over with marijuana. She calls it Alakazam, and so they're getting ready to come over there, but the little boy's like, I know you're talking about weed, and I'm going to tell my parents. So you better not, because I'll tell your parents about your browser history. And it's this nice little it's this nice little like funny thing that they kind of have going back and forth. And you know what? I thought that was kind of cute because it was like a little like brother sister kind of bond. You could tell that they were just doing it out of love for each other. And so she's like, all right, well, I'll tuck you in. She tucks him in, and they have this little cute thing where she says that he's her favorite kid that she babysits, and he says that she's all right and he likes her. So eventually her boyfriend comes over and he's got a tattoo, and the tattoo is of the date actually. It's kind of weird because they make it out to be this like really big thing, and then it's just a tattoo of the date. The little boy ends up freaking out and talking about how there's someone in his room, and he calls Vicky over, and Vicky's like, all right, well, I'm gonna go check on it. And originally he's like, well, why don't you have your boyfriend do it, because he doesn't want her to get hurt. And she's like, no, I got it, I can handle it. So she goes in, checks the room, and when I say like she really didn't check the room that well, she ends up going fake scaring the little boy, and then tucking him in. He's like, oh, okay, close the closet, and then he's in the closet that she didn't check, and that's in the trailer as well. He ends up coming out, and she starts trying to run away. She slips on her socks, which was new. I hadn't seen that happen, but there was hardwood floor, and I mean, I guess that's realistic, but I haven't seen that approach in a movie. That's like up there with, tripping on your shoelaces. But he ends up getting Vicky and killing her. She tells the little boy to run, so he runs, and Vicky's boyfriend ends up grabbing the knife and going upstairs to investigate further and try to fight whoever it was. Now, at this point, Allison's left. Cameron, who is her friend and her boyfriend's friend, or ex-boyfriend at this point, they're walking, and they're walking home because she's really she's walking over to Vicky's actually, because they're really upset, and so they start walking, and they're talking about what happened, and it gets a little bit weird. You can tell that Cameron's starting to kind of hit on her, and Allison's just kind of like, being nice. So they climb over this fence into this backyard, and there's another reference there to the mask from the second movie, and they are walking across, and Cameron tries to kiss her, and she's like, whoa, no. And she reasonably freaks out because she doesn't want to kiss him. She's not interested. And at this point, it's interesting because Cameron, opposed to, he does do that thing where he starts kind of blaming on alcohol and blaming on that. But it was interesting because he also kind of, he didn't pursue it past that point. He didn't do anything crazy like that. So it was definitely, he was respectful post that, where he ends up, apologizing and then it gets a little bit over the top. He starts talking about other things, and so that's it. She ends up leaving, and she's like, I'm going home. So they split up. He's sitting in the backyard, and he's kind of upset about it, and Michael ends up using the motion lights, which was awesome. This is nice because it's cool to see, like, Michael from here, then here and here. I mean, I know it's unrealistic. The lights would have kept on the whole time he was moving, but the motion lights are going, and every time the light comes back on, he's a little bit closer, and he ends up stabbing Cameron on top of the fence. So Allison ends up finding out about Michael because she comes back and she hears Cameron screaming, and she's like, holy crap. She starts running around, and eventually a neighbor ends up opening up. Cops end up coming and meeting up with her. By this point, the cops had found out about Vicky and her boyfriend and Lori and all that. There was that first encounter, and the cops agreed to work with Laurie Strode to get the family into her house because they knew that she had a bunker and that they would be safe there. So all the Strodes are over at Laurie's house at this point. This cop ends up catching up with Allison and is like, all right, well, I need to take you to your grandma's house. Everyone's over there. Everyone's safe. We're hiding away. And he kind of gives her the rundown. It's Michael Myers. And the neighbors at this point, actually, which was really refreshing, you can see them. They're giving Allison water. They had a blanket on her. They're helping keep her calm. They're keeping her company till the police come. It was a really nice thing because normally in these movies that the neighbors, they don't get involved, so it was nice to see that there was a change in that. Cop picks up Michael and picks up Allison, and they start driving with the doctor, the therapist. After he got shot, he woke up, and they said, hey, look, this guy knows Michael Myers better than any of us. He's perfect to have on this trip, and you need to take him, which I thought was a little bit weird because normally you wouldn't bring a therapist on something this dangerous, but I see what they're saying. Michael Myers is dangerous. This guy knows him. Take him with you. And so the cop does. And they're driving. He sees Michael Myers, bloody knife and everything. And he goes and he runs Michael Myers over. because he decides, like, I'm not gonna let him live. There's a whole thing where he had let him live before, and he's like, I'm not making the same mistake twice. And the therapist before this was like, hey, remember, you can't kill him, he's property of the state, whatever. And the cop's like, I'll see what I can do. But he's set on killing Michael Myers. He doesn't want to give him another chance. After that, Michael Myers is on the ground, and the cop goes out to check on him. He's like, all right. And the therapist goes, oh, he's dead, which is actually, you find out, is a lie. And the cop ends up going over, and the therapist pulls out a scalpel pen and stabs the cop in the throat, killing him. And the therapist ends up sneaking up on the window and jump scaring Allison with the Myers mask on, puts Michael Myers in the back seat with Allison, and starts driving off because they're going to drive over to the Strode house. He starts talking about how, this is what it feels like to kill. He's really interested in finding out why is Michael like killing, as he's talked about in the past of the film. So they're going over to the Strode house at this point. And Allison, is sitting there, and he wants Michael to talk. This is what the therapist wants. He's really interested in what Michael has to say. They're driving over to Strode house, and Michael Myers is starting to wake up, and Allison's trying to get out the car, and Allison's like, Michael talked to me. And he's like, oh, he did? Well, what did he say? And she sees that Michael's starting to wake up, his hand's starting to move, and Allison goes, if you let me go, I'll tell you what he told me. He said one word, I'll tell you what he said if you let me go. He ends up pulling over in the middle of the road, and because of how it looked, he kind of like swerved it to a stop. There are cops on the road. They're really close to the Strode house. They have a cops stationed out front of it, and they see it, and there's this nice little cop duo in the car, and they're talking about sandwiches, and it was a really funny little thing. It was nice, and it was realistic. It was a nice realistic conversation. It wasn't over the top funny or fake funny. It was like a nice casual conversation that you'd have with like a friend or a partner. And so Michael Myers at this point, she's like, all right, and she looks over and sees he has his mask on, and Michael kills the therapist. He crushes the cage that separates where the police are from the criminals, crushes the cage onto him, and the therapist ends up falling out, and he's like, please say something, Michael. And he doesn't say anything. He ends up crushing the therapist's head by stomping on it, which was a really interesting scene. And at this point, Allison kind of slips away and runs into the woods. The cop duo seeing this car stop like that, and they're like, all right, this is a little bit weird. They try radioing it in. It wasn't working. They end up driving in there, and they drive up to the car, and the cops get out, and they end up investigating it, and it just kind of cuts away. Now at this point, we go back, Allison's running in. We go back to Laurie Strode's house. The dad is sitting in the living room area. He's kind of looking out the window. He sees the cop car pull up, and at this point, I knew exactly what happened. They died, but I was wondering, what happened. He goes out. He sees the cop duo in the car. He's like, hey, what's going on? The window, he looks in the window and sees the one cop has his throat slit, and on his lap is the head of the other cop with his eyes kind of carved out like a jack-o'-lantern head of a human being. And then Michael Myers steps out from behind him and kills him. Which, by the way, they don't really mourn, which was a little bit weird to me. And then I can kind of see why Allison doesn't know he's dead. But the mom and Laurie Strode definitely know he's dead. I mean, it's hard to miss. But, I'm just nitpicking at that point. At this point, Laurie ends up bringing her daughter into the bunker. And Allison's still running around. And Laurie is kind of searching through the whole entire house. And she goes over, she sees he's at the door, she's standing at the door, he grabs in. This is that scene where you see his hands break through the window and start grabbing Laurie Strode. But at this point, Laurie doesn't get her anything. She pulls the shotgun over and shoots the fingers off his one hand, which becomes important later on. And she runs away, and she goes down, and she ends up talking to her daughter. Michael's walking around, didn't figure out where they were. He ends up, and this becomes cat and mouse. Laurie Strode ends up leaving the bunker again, and she's looking around the whole entire house, and she's following the blood trail. She ends up checking through the closets, which is a nice little way of saying that the roles are switched now. Before, Laurie Strode was hiding in the closet, and that's how she stabbed Michael in the eye. So it was kind of like cat and mouse in reverse. She ends up going into this room full of mannequins, and you find the dad is dead, and he's stuffed up in the upper end of the closet, and Michael kind of pops out, and they get in this little bit of a scuffle, and Michael ends up stabbing Laurie, and she falls off this balcony. And he looks away for a second. When he looks back, Laurie's gone, which is an homage to when Michael fell out of the window and they looked down and they saw that he was gone as well. I knew she wasn't at this point. Allison ends up catching up to the house. She ends up coming in, and she sees all this, like, kind of everything's all crazy and messed up. And the mom gets her down into the bunker, and they're sitting under there. And Michael knows where they are. Starts shaking this little cabinet thing that hides the bunker, and ends up breaking off this counter that's kind of hiding the bunker. And the mom is sitting there. She has the gun. And she starts crying and saying that she can't do it and that she's sorry. And because he thinks that she's actually not going to shoot him, he peeks out. And just when she said that, when she said, she goes, gotcha, and she shoots him, which is a nice way to show, like, she tells her training. She knows exactly what she has to do. Her mom always taught her to fake being scared because Michael is drawn by fear. Laurie Strode comes out from the dark little hallway and, like, happy Halloween, Michael, and starts, hitting him and beating him down. And they get him down to this little into the little basement thing, the little bunker. They run out, and Michael ends up grabbing the mom because he gets up and he grabs her before she can get out, and then Allison grabs the knife, ends up stabbing him, showing that they all kind of contributed to stopping Michael. And at that point they reveal that the bunker isn't a cage to hide in, but it was actually a trap. And they pull this lever and these little spikes kind of close up, and you find out Laurie Strode has been kind of pumping gas into the house, and that a flame starts and she blows up the house, and with Michael in it, and they all got out. And the pacing of this was really awesome. It was a really nice little thing. And then it ends, they're carrying out Laurie Strode, and they get in the back of his pickup truck. You see Allison kind of grip the knife a little bit tighter, and it kind of goes back to this line of one monster created another monster. And, it's the idea that, Michael created Laurie, and then from there also created Allison as a monster. And that maybe she'll end up taking the mantle of killing. And at the very end credits, you can kind of hear Michael still breathing a little bit, which I don't think that means Michael's still alive, but that the series is going to continue, and that they still have that breath. I hope that it's not that Michael's going to come back for the sequel. But there's something I wanted to say, and this is something I was saying, with Laurie being there and Laurie drinking, having her freak out and saying that she knew all this stuff. There's also another line where she says that she prayed for Michael to escape Smith's Grove so she could kill him herself to make sure he was dead. I have a theory, and a lot of people believe this as well. A lot of people say the therapist helped Michael escape, and that's why the bus crashed. I think it was Laurie. I think Laurie drove the bus off the road, and maybe the therapist helped him get out of his chains to get out. But I think that what happened was Laurie Strode drove that bus off the road to get Michael to escape, so that this way she could go and have this night out and kill him herself. And that's our blow by blow. As you guys know, I did like the movie. I feel horror fans will love this movie. And if you like gore, there's some good gore kills in this. Some of them were questionable, but some of them were pretty good. And I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Let me know if you want me to do more spoiler reviews. I have a few more reviews going, and I have some other requests that I'm working on as well. And I'll kind of be laying out a schedule for those as well. Hopefully this will be out. I'm recording this before Halloween. I'm recording this on Thursday, the 25th. So hopefully we can get this out either on Halloween or the day prior. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. And I'm sorry this one's so long, but there's so much that happened in the movie. I hope you guys have a great day. And I'll see you guys later. Peace.